All right, so all of that said, we're finally ready to move into chapter 9. We've laid some great groundwork. It took us about an hour or more. And the groundwork not only included information about statistics, but also like some really interesting things about technology, and then also about learning and the spirit of adventure, and also about the history of humanity. And like just like a little perspective, like less than 1% of 1% is the time that humans have existed. And look at it, look at how much we've gotten done and what we've created, the tools we've created. It's amazing. And that perspective can humble us and also commend us and make us feel great. Like look at what we've achieved. It's extraordinary, extraordinary. So now we're going to move into this stuff here. And the first thing you need to learn, there's two things you're going to learn here. First thing you need to learn is developing a null and alternative hypotheses. And so you're going to learn some new vocabulary. And so this is hugely important. And it's not complicated, it's pretty simple. But if you don't get this, you're going to be confused. So that's why it's hugely important. So there's going to be a null hypothesis and there's going to be an alternative hypothesis. And here's the framework by which you need to understand those two hypotheses. Okay, so the null hypothesis is that nothing has changed. This is the current state of the way things are right now. It's the status quo. There's no change. Okay, that's null. Null is like nothing. So if you go and you look up what does null mean, null define. Null is having no legal or binding force, invalid, having or associated with the value 0, a 0, combine a signal with another in order to create a null, cancel out. It's like no, it's like null is like no, it's like nothing, it's like 0, okay? So when we talk about null, nothing has changed. There's no change, right? It's the current state. It's the status quo. That's null. The alternative hypothesis, okay, things have changed. And notice the color coding here. Null is nothing changed. Alternative is things have changed. Null is current state. Alternative is new state. And that's in bold because you'll often, when you're reading problems about hypothesis testing, it'll be like, you know, new. You'll see the word new in there and you're like, that's my alternative hypothesis, right? So the alternative hypothesis, things change, it's a new state, there's change, it's the new way of doing things, okay? So null is no change, nothing changed, it's the current state, it's the status quo. Alternative, things change, it's the new state, there's been change. All right, that's the alternative. That's the first thing, okay? I almost want to stop right there. But there's one more thing for you to learn. And so the next thing for you to learn is type 1 and type 2 errors. This isn't like critical, but it's important. It's not like this is like you got to know this stone cold, right? Stone cold. You got to know the difference. That you got to know that null is nothing changed. There's no change. It's the current state, status quo. And you have to know the alternative is the new. Alternative is the new. Alternative is new. Alternative is the new state. Things have changed. There's been change, okay? You got to know those two. Absolutely. But this is like, yeah, it's good for you to know. Otherwise, you'll be like, I don't know. And you could still do okay, but you should know this. And particularly, you should know type 1 error. And so type 1 error is, and this picture looks a little bit different actually than the one that's in the textbook. So hold on, let me look at the one in the textbook. Okay, so I cleaned this picture up a little bit, and I did that by, if you look at like the highlighting, oh dang it, I just moved all that. If you look at the highlighting here, like I added these little boxes of white and just covered up. This was like, I guess, some example from later, because I copied it from a slide we'll see later. But just clarify it, I got rid of the little things that used to be there if you want to see what was there before. It's just like too much information, right? And so now you just see the conclusion and the population condition. And so here is like, you know, you're doing statistics on a sample to try to figure out what is reality. And so reality is like there's some population and you're measuring that population with your sample, right? And you're going to have hypotheses or hypotheses about reality, about the population. And you're going to try to figure that out with your sample. And you'll get a conclusion from your sample. And your conclusion will be either to accept the null hypothesis, nothing has changed, right? It's the current state, you're accepting it, like your conclusion is nothing changed. Or your conclusion will be to reject the null hypothesis, which means you're accepting the alternative hypotheses. And the alternative hypothesis is that like, hey, things have changed, right? So here a type 1 error is that you're rejecting the null hypotheses and you're accepting the alternative hypotheses. And you're saying things have changed, right? But actually the null hypothesis is true, nothing has changed. Reality is that there's been no change. And your statistics somehow with your sample, you rejected what is true. So to reject what is true, to reject reality, to do a sample and get statistics, which tells you that reality is different, that we have some new state, that things have changed, right? But really, no, there is no change, nothing is different. That's a type 1 error. So you reject the null hypothesis, and the null hypothesis was true, right? That's type 1. That's a type 1 error. And that's just what they call it. It's just type 1 error. So that is like saying, that things have changed, that there's a new state, when really there is not. Nothing has really changed. That's type 1. Okay? And then type 2 is the exact opposite. You're saying nothing has changed, and it's like, no, actually things have changed. There's a true state. So I'm trying to think of a mnemonic device to help us remember that. So hang on. I mean, we could always ask ChatGPT. So I'm going to download this file, download, get a PNG, that's fine. And then we'll come back over here and we'll upload it. So I'm going to go over here and upload from my computer and get that PNG. And I'll say, can you help, going back to statistics, can you please help me come up with, how do you spell mnemonic? Mnemonic, something like that. That's it right there. Can you please help me come up with a mnemonic device to remember that type 1 errors are saying things have changed, that there's a new reality, a new way that things are, when in truth, nothing has changed. The null hypothesis should not have been rejected. I was thinking for a mnemonic device to remember this, that type 1 could be reality is still reality as it is. One is singular, so it's like one is singular, so it's like one is still one. There has been no change. And then the mnemonic could also help me remember that type 2 is the error is that things have changed. There is a new reality, we have gone from 1 to 2, but a type 2 error is that even though there's a new reality and the current state, the null hypothesis should be rejected, right? Because if you're if you reject the null hypothesis and there's null, that 0, you reject it, so it's false, right? Well, the true state is false, right? The null hypothesis is false. So let me clarify that. Change. There's a new reality. We've gone from 2 to 1, but type 2 error is that even though there's a new reality in the current state, is that the null hypothesis is false, right? The null hypothesis H0 is false. We accept. The null hypothesis is false. We accept the null hypothesis, even though we are now at 2, which is a change from 1, meaning the null hypothesis, meaning that we have gone from 1 to 2. There has been change in reality in the population, but we failed to reject. But we did not reject the null hypothesis. You can see that mnemonic is a bit awkward. Do you have a better one? Spirit of adventure and exploration, baby. Moving into the unknown, the force of the unknown. I see what you're trying to do with the mnemonic device for distinguishing type 1 and type 2 errors. It's a creative approach. Let's refine that and make it a bit simpler and easier to remember. Type 1 error. You reject the null hypothesis when it's actually true. So the null hypothesis is true and you reject it. So reality is that nothing has changed, right? It's the null hypothesis, but you reject that. That's a type 1 error. Yeah, you reject the null hypothesis when it's actually true. This means you're saying there's been a change or something is different, new reality, but in reality nothing has changed. Yeah. Mnemonic type 1 is jumping the gun. Imagine type 1 as one person jumping ahead too soon. There's something new or different, but really everything is still the same. So type 1. Visualize, think of one person. Oh, that's good. One person jumping out of line thinking they need to move ahead, but no one else is moving because nothing has changed. All right, I kind of like that. Type 1 error is one person like jumping out of line. Things have changed. Things have changed. They're rejecting the way things are, the current state. They're rejecting it, rejecting that null hypothesis. One person, type 1. Things have changed, but really nothing has changed. That's a type 1 error. Type 2 error, you fail to reject the null hypothesis when it's false. So reality is that things have changed and you accept it, right? And you accept the null hypothesis that nothing has changed. So type 2 error, you fail to reject the null hypothesis when it's false, which means you're saying nothing has changed, status quo remains the same, but in reality things have changed. Type 2 is stuck in the past. Imagine two people still standing in place even though the world around them has moved forward. They're stuck, refusing to recognize that reality has changed. Visualize two people standing still, not recognizing the change, but the world has moved on to something new. Simplified mnemonics. Type 1, jumping the gun. One gun. I like that. Assuming there's a change when there's none, right? So assuming there's a change, right? Hey, things have changed. Jumped out of line. Reject the current status quo, reject the way things are, things have changed, but really nothing has changed, type 1. And then type 2, stuck in the past, failing to recognize the change. Type 2 is stuck in the past, failing to recognize the change, right? Like things have changed, right? The way things were, the status quo, it's changed, it's no longer true. But there's two people who are like, no, things are still the way they are. They're accepting the null hypothesis, and the null hypothesis is that nothing has changed. That's what H0, H is hypothesis, 0 is null, 0, nothing, no change. I like those. So type 2 error, you're acting as though something new is happening, jumping ahead, but in truth, nothing has changed. Type 1 error, you're acting as though, type 1 error, you're acting as though something new is happening, jumping ahead, but in truth, nothing has changed. Type 2 error, you're stuck thinking nothing has changed, but reality has moved forward. Does that help clarify? That's great. That's great. Amazing. Cool, and we'll copy this here, and we'll grab all this. You know, maybe we could just do this. We'll get, because it's all formatted nice and everything, we'll get the snipping tool, and we'll go new, and we'll go whoop, 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 ba-boom, and then let's come here, and we'll put in, I don't know, let's do a blank slide. Kapow! And do we need more room? Or is that enough? And then we'll come back over here and we'll do this one. New, and we'll grab that one. Kapow! And we'll come over here and do this and put that one in. Boom! There we go. And do we want these on the same slide? I think that fits, man. I think that fits. I like it. And that means we don't need that one there. And then we'll do this one, and we'll grab this. Oh, and we'll put this one here, and we'll put that one here. And I don't know, how should we differentiate it? Put it over to the side. So now it goes like this, and then like this. I like that fine. Maybe we put it up here. And I don't know what this number is here. I'm not a big fan of that number. So we're going to go to slide and edit theme. And we'll go up to the theme. And this doesn't look like I'm editing the theme. I'm not editing the theme. We'll go to slide and edit theme. And then we'll go to here. Oh, I just keep coming back to that slide, edit theme. And I need this one. I'm clicking on the wrong one. And where's my page number? Not showing me my page number. I don't know how you get rid of the slide number. Unsupported placeholder. Maybe that's it. Get rid of that. Did that get rid of it? I think I got rid of it. Perfect. All right, so that's developing the null and alternative hypotheses, right? You just got to remember null is nothing's changed, current state, no change, status quo. And alternative, things have changed, new state, change. And then we have type 1 and type 2 errors. And, you know, our population is the current state. The population is reality. And then we do a sample and we draw a conclusion. And a type 1 error is one person jumps out lying. Things have changed, things have changed. But in reality, nothing's changed, right? So they rejected reality. They rejected the way things are. They rejected the null hypothesis. But in reality, they shouldn't have done that. The null hypothesis is the way reality really is. Nothing has changed. And then a type 2 error is that things have changed, right? Reality, the null hypothesis that nothing has changed, that's false. It's a double false, right? Nothing has changed, false. That means things have changed, double negative. And so reality, the population, is that, you know, things changed. And then a type 2 error is two people are still standing there saying, no, nothing has changed. So that's a type 2 error. Two people are standing there. And then we're going to use what we learned in chapter 8, right? Population mean, population means, population standard deviation known, unknown, population mean, population standard deviation known, unknown. We're going to use that to, you know, just do the same thing we did in chapter 8, but we'll have questions where there's like a hypothesis. And we'll test that hypothesis using the same techniques we learned in chapter 8 with sampling distributions and z-scores and t-scores, z for population standard deviation known, t for population standard deviation unknown. We'll test those, and you know, we'll be able to make some determination based upon our sample about whether or not we should accept or reject the null hypotheses and the hypotheses, those things we've already learned. All right, that's coming up in the next videos. And by the way, just knowing this stuff's solid takes you so far in this chapter. Like there's like, this is like so much of the chapter is just getting your head wrapped around that. The rest of it you already know. All right, see you in the next videos.